London, 1849. The rain pelted against the carriage windows as Theodora Zanetti pressed her gloved fingers against the cool glass, watching droplets race each other down the pane. This journey marked her third day in England, and her first as companion to a man she had never met. "We shall arrive at Thornfield Manor within the hour, Your Grace," her lady's maid, Martha, said softly. Theodora nodded, her reflection in the window showing a woman of 26 years, regal even in her widow's black. The Duchess of Claremont had come to England at the request of her late husband's cousin, Lady Helen Pembroke, who had written with an unusual proposition. My dearest friend, the Earl of Xander, has lost his wife these 2 years past, Lady Pembroke had written. His grief has turned him into a recluse, and I fear for his spirit. He needs companionship, conversation, not romance, for his heart remains buried with his Caroline. Would you consider a season in the countryside? Your reputation for kindness and wisdom would make you the perfect balm for his wounded soul. The proposition was unconventional but not scandalous. A widowed duchess visiting a widowed earl, with proper chaperonage, would raise few eyebrows. And Theodora needed escape from Venice, where memories of her husband's sudden death still haunted every canal and palazzo. As the carriage turned up a long gravel drive, Thornfield Manor appeared through the mist, a grand house of weathered stone, not ostentatious but decidedly aristocratic, with tall chimneys and ivy climbing its eastern wall. Several windows glowed with warm light despite the gloomy afternoon. The carriage halted, and moments later, Theodora was being ushered into a spacious entrance hall. A butler, grey-haired and stiff-backed, bowed deeply. "Your Grace, welcome to Thornfield. I am Simmons. Lord Xander awaits you in the library." Following the butler through corridors lined with ancestral portraits, Theodora smoothed her travelling dress and lifted her chin. She had agreed to this arrangement out of compassion, nothing more. She would be gracious, kind, and most importantly, unmoved. The library doors opened to reveal a vast room lined with books from floor to ceiling, a crackling fire in the marble hearth casting dancing shadows across the oriental carpet. A tall figure stood by the window, silhouetted against the rain-washed glass. "Your Grace, the Duchess of Claremont," Simmons announced, then withdrew, closing the doors behind him. The man turned, and Theodora's carefully rehearsed greeting died on her lips. The Earl of Xander was nothing like she had imagined. Lady Pembroke had described a broken man, bowed by grief. But the gentleman who now approached her stood straight and proud, his broad shoulders unbent by sorrow. He appeared to be in his late 30s, with thick chestnut hair just beginning to silver at the temples. His eyes, deep blue and penetrating, met hers with a directness that was almost startling. "Your Grace," he said, his voice a rich baritone as he executed a perfect bow. "I am Edmund Xander. Welcome to Thornfield." Theodora curtsied, suddenly aware of her travel-worn appearance. "My lord, I thank you for your hospitality. I hope your journey was not too taxing," he inquired, gesturing toward a pair of armchairs flanking the fire. "Not at all," she lied, gratefully taking the offered seat. "England's countryside is captivating, even in the rain." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "You are being kind. Our weather is notorious, particularly in November." Silence fell between them, the crackling fire the only sound as they regarded one another. She had come prepared to offer comfort to a broken man, but Edmund Xander seemed anything but broken. Reserved, yes. Formal, certainly. But his eyes were clear, his manner composed. "I must confess, Lord Xander," Theodora finally said, "Lady Pembroke's description of your circumstances led me to expect someone quite different." His eyebrow quirked. "Did she portray me as a wretched creature wallowing in grief, pacing empty halls and weeping into my brandy?" The unexpected humor in his tone surprised her. "Something of that nature, yes. Helen has always had a flair for the dramatic." He poured tea from a silver service that had been waiting on a small table. 2 years of mourning have taught me to present a composed face to the world, Your Grace." But make no mistake, his voice softened as he handed her the delicate china cup. "My cousin's assessment of my solitude was not entirely inaccurate." Something in his expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked, touched Theodora more deeply than any outward display of grief could have done. "I understand solitude, my lord," she replied quietly. "It can become a companion so familiar that one forgets it was never meant to be permanent." His eyes met hers with sudden intensity. "Precisely." The clock on the mantel chimed 4, breaking the moment. Edmund straightened. "You must be tired after your journey. Simmons will show you to your chambers. We dine at 7, if that suits you." "Perfectly, thank you." As she followed the butler upstairs, Theodora found herself puzzling over the Earl. The man she had just met was neither the broken widower of Lady Pembroke's description nor the stern aristocrat his reputation suggested. Edmund Xander was, she realized with some surprise, an enigma, and despite her best intentions, she was curious to unravel him. The following morning dawned clear, the storm having passed in the night. Theodora woke to sunshine streaming through tall windows and the distant sound of hoofbeats. Drawn to the view, she parted the heavy curtains to see a lone rider galloping across the frost-silvered fields below, Edmund Xander, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. He rode with the confidence of a man born to the saddle, horse and rider moving as one across the landscape. Theodora watched until they disappeared into a copse of trees, then turned to prepare for the day. At breakfast, she found herself alone in the morning room, a note propped against the silver coffee pot. Your Grace *. Forgive my absence. Estate matters require my attention until afternoon. Please consider Thornfield at your disposal. Mrs. Lambert, the housekeeper, will provide anything you require. **. Xander *. Theodora spent the morning exploring the house, finding it neither as grand as her late husband's palazzo in Venice nor as austere as she had expected. The rooms held a comfortable elegance, with furnishings that spoke of generations of refined taste rather than ostentatious wealth. In a small drawing room overlooking the rose garden, she discovered a pianoforte. Unable to resist, she sat and began to play, her fingers remembering a Chopin nocturne she had once loved. So absorbed was she in the music that she didn't notice the door opening. "You play beautifully." Theodora's hands faltered on the keys as she turned to find Edmund standing in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to startle you," he said, coming into the room. "Please, don't stop on my account." "I'm afraid I'm rather out of practice," she replied, closing the piano lid. "My husband was the true musician in our marriage. The Duke of Claremont was known for his patronage of the arts, I believe." "Yes." Alessandro loved beauty in all its forms. She smiled at the memory. "Our palazzo in Venice was always filled with musicians, painters, poets. After he died, the silence was deafening." Edmund nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Silence has its own peculiar sound, doesn't it? A sort of hollow ringing that never quite fades." "Exactly so." He moved to the window, gazing out at the gardens where a gardener was covering rosebushes against the coming winter. Caroline adored music. She played the harp, quite poorly, if I'm honest, though I never had the heart to tell her. Theodora smiled at the fondness in his voice. "Was she your childhood sweetheart?" "Hardly." A rueful smile played at his lips. "Caroline despised me when we first met. I was 20, she 18, and I made the grave mistake of criticizing her favorite poet at a literary salon. She called me an insufferable pedant with the soul of an accountant." Theodora laughed despite herself. "A woman of strong opinions." "The strongest." His smile faded. She remained so until the end. The mention of his wife's death brought a somber note to the conversation. Theodora sensed his reluctance to speak further of it and changed the subject. "Will you show me the grounds today, Lord Xander? The view from my window suggested they're quite extensive." Relief flickered across his features. "I would be delighted, Your Grace. Though I should warn you, the recent rains have left the paths rather muddy. I assure you, my lord, I am not afraid of a little mud." This earned her another smile, one that reached his eyes and transformed his solemn features. "Then I shall meet you in the entrance hall at 2 o'clock, dressed for battle against the elements." The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings, Edmund attended to estate business while Theodora wrote letters, read, or occasionally rode out with the groom. Afternoons often found them walking the grounds together, conversing about books, music, politics, and philosophy. Evenings were spent by the fire, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes engaged in lively debate. To her surprise, Theodora found herself looking forward to these conversations. Edmund possessed a sharp intellect tempered by unexpected flashes of humor. He listened as intently as he spoke, a rare quality in Theodora's experience of men. She also began to understand why Lady Pembroke had been so concerned. Though Edmund functioned perfectly well in their small daily circle, he steadfastly refused all invitations to neighboring estates and showed no interest in the upcoming Christmas season's festivities. "Surely you won't spend Christmas alone at Thornfield?" Theodora asked one evening as they played chess in the library. Edmund moved his knight. "I am hardly alone. There's a full staff, and now you, your grace." "But no family?" "No friends." His eyes remained on the chessboard. "Helen usually descends upon me for New Year, bearing gossip and inappropriate gifts. That's still weeks away." Theodora captured his knight with her bishop. "There's to be a Christmas Eve ball at Hartley Park. Lady Hartley sent an invitation this morning." Edmund's mouth tightened. "I don't dance anymore." "Neither do I. But there will be music, conversation, food that we haven't already tasted a dozen times." She paused, studying his expression. "When did you last attend a social gathering, my lord? You sound like my cousin." Lady Pembroke is clearly a woman of sense. He looked up sharply, then sighed when he saw her teasing smile. "If you wish to attend the Hartleys' ball, I'll arrange for my carriage to take you." "That wasn't my question." Edmund sat back, abandoning the game. "Caroline's funeral. That was the last social gathering I attended." Theodora's heart constricted at the pain in his voice. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pressed." "No, you're right to question it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. 2 years is more than society's required mourning period. But the thought of making polite conversation while people whisper behind their fans about poor Xander and whether I'm looking for a replacement. He shook his head. "I cannot bear it." "Then we shall stay here and have our own Christmas celebration," Theodora said decisively. "I'll speak to Mrs. Lambert about decorations, unless you object." The tension in his shoulders eased. "I would like that very much, Your Grace." "Theodora," she said impulsively. "If we're to be Christmas conspirators, I think you might call me Theodora, at least in private." Something shifted in his eyes, surprise, followed by a warmth that made her heart beat faster. "Theodora," he repeated, her name in his voice sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Then you must call me Edmund." The transformation of Thornfield for Christmas became Theodora's mission. Under her direction, evergreen boughs appeared on mantels, red ribbons adorned banisters, and the scents of cloves, cinnamon, and pine filled the air. Edmund watched with bemused tolerance as footmen hauled in a massive fir tree for the great hall. "I haven't seen the house like this since Caroline was alive," he commented as Theodora supervised the hanging of ornaments. "She loved Christmas almost as much as you seem to." "It was always my favorite holiday," Theodora replied, handing him a delicate glass star. "Would you?" "I can't reach the top." Edmund took the star and stretched up to place it at the peak of the tree. Standing close beside him, Theodora caught the scent of sandalwood from his shaving soap. She stepped back quickly, suddenly aware of how familiar they had become. "Perfect," she said, hoping he didn't notice her flushed cheeks. "Now we need only wait for Father Christmas." "I fear he may have forgotten the way to Thornfield," Edmund replied with a wry smile. "It's been some time since he last visited." "Nonsense. Father Christmas never forgets a house where he's welcome." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of how much had changed in the weeks since her arrival. The lonely widower was emerging from his shell, and Theodora found herself looking forward to each day in a way she hadn't since Alessandro's death. The moment was interrupted by Simmons, who entered bearing a silver tray with several calling cards and letters. "The afternoon post, my lord, and Lady Hartley has sent a messenger with a personal note for her grace." Theodora opened the envelope, quickly scanning the contents. "Lady Hartley has heard I'm in residence and specifically requests our presence at her ball." She looked up at Edmund. "She says she won't accept refusal from either of us." Edmund's expression clouded. Amelia Hartley always was persistent. "We could make a brief appearance," Theodora suggested gently. "Just long enough to be polite." He turned away, examining one of the other letters with unnecessary attention. "I'll consider it." But the following morning at breakfast, he surprised her by saying, "I've instructed Simmons to have my formal attire pressed for the Hartleys' ball." Theodora nearly choked on her tea. "You have? If I'm to re-enter society, I might as well do it with the most beautiful woman in England on my arm." The compliment was delivered with such casual sincerity that Theodora felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You flatter me, Edmund." "I state facts, Theodora." His eyes held hers across the table. "Your presence has brought life back to Thornfield. Perhaps it's time I stopped hiding within these walls." She wanted to reach for his hand but restrained herself. "I'm glad," she said simply. That evening, Edmund was called away to deal with a tenant emergency, leaving Theodora to dine alone. After dinner, restless and unable to settle with her book, she wandered to the library where she knew Edmund kept his collection of family portraits. One in particular caught her attention, a miniature in an ornate silver frame. The woman depicted was strikingly beautiful, with abundant dark curls and laughing eyes. This must be Caroline, Theodora thought, studying the delicate features. No wonder Edmund had loved her so deeply. She was 19 when that was painted. Theodora started, turning to find Edmund in the doorway, his greatcoat still dusted with snow. "Forgive me," she said hastily, replacing the miniature. "I didn't mean to pry." "There's nothing to forgive." He crossed to stand beside her, gazing down at his late wife's portrait. "Caroline would have liked you." "Would she?" Theodora asked softly. "Very much." She had no patience for pretense or false sentiment. A sad smile touched his lips. "She would appreciate your directness." "How did she die, Edmund?" The question had been hovering unspoken between them for weeks. "If you'd rather not speak of it, childbirth," he said, his voice tight with remembered pain. "She and our son. 2 years ago this month." Theodora's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry." "As was I." He moved away, pouring himself a measure of brandy from a crystal decanter. "For a very long time, I was nothing but sorry. Sorry and angry and half-mad with grief." He took a swallow of the amber liquid. "Helen was right to worry. Had you seen me a year ago, you would have found a very different man. And now?" He turned to face her, firelight casting dramatic shadows across his features. "Now I find myself looking forward rather than backward. For the first time in 2 years, I'm thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday." His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And I have you to thank for that, Theodora." "I've done nothing but impose my company upon you," she protested softly. "You've done everything." He set down his glass and moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. "You brought light back into these rooms. You've made me remember what it's like to laugh, to debate, to—" He paused, something vulnerable crossing his expression. "To care." The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Theodora's heart hammered in her chest. She had come to Thornfield to offer comfort to a grieving widower, never expecting to find her own grief easing in his company, never imagining she might feel this quickening of her pulse at his nearness. "Edmund," she began, uncertain what she meant to say. The library door burst open, and Simmons entered, his usually impassive face showing alarm. "My lord, forgive the intrusion. Lady Pembroke has arrived." "Helen?" Now. Edmund stepped back, the intimate moment shattered. It's nearly midnight. Yes, my lord. Her carriage has just pulled up. She appears to be in some distress. Edmund glanced at Theodora, his expression unreadable. Excuse me. I should. Of course, she said quickly. Go to your cousin. As he strode from the room, Theodora sank into a chair, her emotions in turmoil. What had almost happened? And more troublingly, why did she feel such keen disappointment at the interruption? Lady Helen Pembroke swept into Thornfield like a storm, bringing with her a flurry of trunks, maids, and urgent whispers. By the time Theodora came down to breakfast the following morning, the household was abuzz with speculation. Edmund rose as she entered the morning room, his face grave. Good morning, Theodora. I apologize for the commotion. Helen arrived with rather unexpected news. Lady Pembroke herself sat at the table, a striking woman in her early 40s with Edmund's blue eyes and a decidedly less reserved manner. She rose with a rustle of silk. Your Grace! How delightful to meet you at last. I'm Helen Pembroke, Edmund's much-maligned cousin. She extended her hands with a warm smile. Thank you for answering my letter. I can see already that my dear cousin is much improved under your influence. Lady Pembroke, a pleasure, Theodora replied, taking the offered hands. Though I'm afraid any improvement in Lord Xander's spirits is entirely his own doing. Helen's knowing glance between them suggested she believed otherwise. Nonsense. Edmund was determined to brood himself into an early grave before you arrived. She retook her seat with a dramatic sigh. And now I fear I've brought fresh troubles to his door. Helen, Edmund said warningly. Oh, pish. Her Grace is practically family at this point. Helen leaned forward conspiratorially. I fled London under something of a cloud, Your Grace. My husband's cousin, Lord Reginald Tate, has been spreading the most vicious rumours about me. What sort of rumours? Theodora asked, accepting a cup of coffee from the footman. He claims I've been conducting an affair with his brother-in-law. Helen's expression darkened. Pure fabrication, of course, but Reginald has considerable influence in certain circles. The whispers have become unbearable. Lady Tate apparently believes the rumours, Edmund added grimly. She's threatened to ensure Helen is cut from all respectable society unless she leaves England immediately. How dreadful, Theodora said. But surely your husband is in India on diplomatic business and won't return until spring. Helen dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. I've nowhere else to turn, Edmund. You know I wouldn't impose if it weren't dire. You're always welcome at Thornfield, Helen. You know that. His cousin reached across to squeeze his hand gratefully. You're the best of men, Edmund. Now, she continued, her mood shifting mercurially, tell me about this Christmas ball you're attending. I shall need a new gown, of course. Edmund blinked. I don't recall mentioning, Simmons told my maid, who told me, Helen said dismissively. The Hartley's ball is legendary. I wouldn't miss it for all the scandals in London. She turned to Theodora. And you, Your Grace? What will you wear? I hadn't given it much thought, Theodora admitted. Her widow's wardrobe consisted largely of blacks and greys, appropriate for quiet country living but hardly festive. Then we must remedy that immediately. Helen clapped her hands. I've brought my sempstress, Madame Fournier. She's a miracle worker. We shall put our heads together and create something spectacular. Edmund cleared his throat. Helen, the Duchess may not want, nonsense, his cousin interrupted. Every woman wants to look her best at a Christmas ball. She fixed Theodora with a penetrating gaze. Particularly when accompanied by a handsome earl who can't take his eyes off her. Theodora felt heat rise to her cheeks as Edmund exclaimed, Helen. Oh, don't Helen me, Edmund. I have eyes. She rose from the table. Now, Your Grace, shall we consult with Madam? The ball is only 10 days away. As she followed Lady Pembroke from the room, Theodora caught Edmund's apologetic glance. She smiled reassuringly, though inside, her thoughts were in turmoil. Helen's perceptiveness was unsettling. Had her growing feelings for Edmund been so obvious? And more importantly, did he share them? The night of the Hartleys' ball arrived with perfect December weather, a light dusting of snow beneath a clear, star-filled sky. Theodora stood before the mirror in her chamber, scarcely recognizing herself. Madame Fournier had indeed worked wonders. The gown was midnight blue silk, the bodice adorned with delicate silver embroidery that caught the light with every movement. The neckline was more daring than Theodora would have chosen, but still within the bounds of propriety for a widow past first mourning. "You look magnificent, Your Grace," Martha murmured as she fastened a diamond pendant at Theodora's throat, one of the few pieces she had brought from Italy. "It feels strange," Theodora admitted, smoothing the rich fabric. "I haven't worn color since Alessandro died." "The Duke would want you to shine," her maid said gently. "And if I may be so bold, his lordship downstairs will be struck speechless when he sees you." Theodora's heart fluttered at the thought. These past days with Helen in residence had afforded few private moments with Edmund, but she had caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "That will do, Martha," she said, trying to sound composed. "I shouldn't keep them waiting." Descending the grand staircase, she heard voices from the entrance hall below, Helen's animated tones and Edmund's deeper response. Taking a steadying breath, she rounded the final turn. The conversation below ceased abruptly. Helen, resplendent in crimson silk, let out a delighted gasp. "Your Grace! You're absolutely stunning!" But it was Edmund's reaction that Theodora sought. He stood at the foot of the stairs, immaculate in formal black evening wear, his eyes widening as they took in her appearance. For a moment, he seemed genuinely speechless, and then he moved forward, extending his hand. "Theodora," he said softly, "you are breathtaking." She placed her gloved hand in his, feeling a tremor in his usually steady grip. "Thank you. You look rather handsome yourself." Something passed between them, a current of understanding, of mutual admiration that went beyond mere appearance. "The carriage awaits, lovebirds," Helen called, breaking the spell. "And we mustn't be fashionably late, we must be precisely on time to make the grandest entrance possible." The journey to Hartley Park took less than half an hour, but it felt both interminable and too brief to Theodora. Seated beside Edmund in the carriage, acutely aware of his presence in the darkness, she found herself both dreading and anticipating the evening ahead. Hartley Park blazed with light, every window illuminated against the night sky. Carriages lined the circular drive, disgorging guests in all their finery. As Edmund handed first Helen and then Theodora down from their carriage, Theodora saw curious glances directed their way. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them," Edmund replied, offering her his arm. "They're merely admiring the most beautiful woman at the ball." Inside, the Hartleys' grand ballroom glittered with hundreds of candles. A chamber orchestra played from a dais at one end, while elegantly dressed guests circulated, greeting friends and eyeing newcomers. Their hostess, Lady Hartley, a handsome woman in her 50s, hurried forward to greet them. "Edmund Xander, as I live and breathe. We had almost given you up for lost." She kissed his cheek affectionately before turning to Theodora. "And this must be the Duchess of Claremont. My dear, I've heard so much about you. Thank you for coaxing our recluse back into society." "Lady Hartley," Edmund interjected smoothly, "may I formally present her Grace, Theodora, Duchess of Claremont." "Theodora, Lady Amelia Hartley, our hostess and an old friend of my mother's." "Your Grace, welcome to Hartley Park." "And Helen. What an unexpected pleasure. I thought you were in London for the season." "A change of plans," Helen replied airily. "The country air is so much more invigorating, don't you find?" As Lady Hartley led them further into the ballroom, Theodora became aware of the ripple of whispers that followed their progress. Edmund's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ignore them," she said quietly. "They're merely curious." He covered her hand on his arm with his own. "I find I don't care what they think, as long as you're beside me." The simple statement warmed her more than the blazing fires that heated the vast room. The evening progressed pleasantly enough. While neither Theodora nor Edmund danced, they conversed with various neighbors and acquaintances who approached to welcome them. Helen, less restrained by morning conventions, was soon whirling around the floor with a succession of partners. It was during one such dance, as Theodora and Edmund stood observing from the edge of the room, that Lady Hartley rejoined them with a troubled expression. "Edmund, my dear, I feel I should warn you. The Tates have just arrived." Edmund stiffened. "Reginald Tate is here." "With Lady Tate and their daughter," Lady Hartley confirmed. "I couldn't very well exclude them, he's Lord Hartley's second cousin. But given what Helen has told me—" She glanced across the room to where Helen was laughing with her current partner, oblivious to the new arrivals. "Thank you for the warning, Amelia," Edmund said grimly. As Lady Hartley moved away to greet other guests, Theodora felt Edmund's tension. "Perhaps we should find Helen," she suggested. "Warn her before there's an unpleasant encounter." He nodded, but before they could move, a cold voice spoke from behind them. "Lord Xander. What a surprise to see you among the living." They turned to face a tall, thin man with hard eyes and a mouth set in a perpetual sneer. Beside him stood a severe-looking woman whose gaze swept over Theodora with barely disguised disdain. "Lord Tate," Edmund acknowledged stiffly. "Lady Tate. May I present Her Grace, the Duchess of Claremont?" "Your Grace," Tate said with a cursory bow. "I wasn't aware the Earl had acquaintances from the continent." The slight pause before acquaintances carried clear insinuation. Theodora felt Edmund tense beside her. "The Duchess is a family friend," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "She has honored Thornfield with her presence this winter." Lady Tate's eyebrow arched. "Indeed? How unconventional. Though I suppose one must expect that from a household that harbors Lady Pembroke." "Helen is my cousin, Lady Tate," Edmund replied coldly. "As such, she will always be welcome in my home. Even when she flees London to escape the consequences of her indiscretions." Lord Tate's thin lips curved in a malicious smile. "Tell me, Xander, are you aware of the scandal your cousin has caused? Or perhaps such behavior is now considered acceptable at Thornfield?" Theodora felt Edmund's arm tighten beneath her hand, saw the dangerous flash in his eyes. Before he could respond, she stepped forward. "Lord Tate," she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby, "in Italy, we have a saying, 'He who spreads rumors collects shame.' I would hate to see such an esteemed gentleman as yourself bring dishonor to your family name through careless speech." A flush of anger spread across Tate's sallow features. "Your Grace presumes much, considering your brief acquaintance with the parties involved." "On the contrary," Theodora replied smoothly, "I believe my judgment is unclouded by long-standing animosities or personal jealousies." She smiled coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe Lord Xander promised me a tour of Lady Hartley's famous conservatory." Without waiting for a response, she turned, her hand still on Edmund's arm, leading him away from the seething couple. "That," Edmund said as they made their way through the crowd, "was magnificent." "It was reckless," Theodora admitted, her heart pounding. "But I couldn't stand by while he insulted both Helen and you. I've never seen Reginald Tate rendered speechless before." A smile tugged at the corner of Edmund's mouth. "You're rather formidable when roused, Duchess." They found Helen in the card room, blissfully unaware of the Tates' arrival. When informed, she paled beneath her rouge. "Perhaps we should leave," she suggested, uncharacteristically subdued. "Absolutely not," Edmund said firmly. "We will not give Tate the satisfaction. Besides," he added with a glance at Theodora, "I believe he's met his match tonight." The remainder of the evening passed without further incident, though Theodora was conscious of speculative glances and whispered conversations whenever she and Edmund passed by. Whether the interest stemmed from the confrontation with the Tates or simply curiosity about her relationship with the reclusive Earl, she couldn't be sure. As their carriage rolled back toward Thornfield in the early hours of the morning, Helen dozed in her corner while Edmund and Theodora sat side by side, their gloved hands nearly touching on the seat between them. "Thank you," Edmund said quietly, "for defending Helen." "And Thornfield?" "I meant what I said to Lord Tate," Theodora replied. "People who spread malicious gossip deserve to be confronted." Still, it was brave. Not many would challenge Reginald Tate publicly. He hesitated, then added, "You spoke of Thornfield as if it were your home." The observation caught her off guard. Had she? "I suppose I've grown fond of the place," she admitted softly. "And its master?" The question was barely audible, but it hung in the darkness between them, weighted with meaning. Before she could formulate a response, the carriage lurched as they turned into Thornfield's drive, jolting Helen awake. "Are we home?" she mumbled, straightening her rumpled gown. "Thank heavens. My feet are absolutely murdered from standing about." Though that young Captain Winslow was quite attentive, wasn't he? "I think he may call tomorrow. Did you see how he looked at me during the quadrille?" The moment between Theodora and Edmund had passed, but as he helped her down from the carriage, his hand lingered on hers a fraction longer than necessary. His eyes, when they met hers, held a question, one she wasn't yet ready to answer. Christmas Eve dawned crisp and clear, the grounds of Thornfield blanketed in pristine snow. Theodora woke early, filled with a strange mixture of anticipation and melancholy. Today marked 2 months since her arrival at Thornfield, 2 months that had transformed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The household bustled with preparations for Christmas. Delicious aromas wafted from the kitchens, and servants hurried about with last-minute decorations and polishing. Even Simmons appeared less formal than usual, wearing a sprig of holly in his lapel. Helen had departed after breakfast to visit friends in the village, leaving Theodora and Edmund alone for the first time in days. They walked together through the snow-covered gardens, their breath forming clouds in the winter air. "I have something for you," Edmund said as they paused by a stone bench overlooking the frozen lake. "A Christmas gift." From his coat pocket, he produced a small package wrapped in silver paper. "It isn't much," he added almost self-consciously. Theodora unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small leather-bound book. Opening the cover, she gasped softly. It was a collection of Venetian poetry, exquisitely printed and illustrated. "Edmund, it's beautiful." She turned the pages reverently. "How did you find this?" "I wrote to a bookseller in London who specializes in Italian literature." He watched her face anxiously. "I thought you might be missing your home, especially at Christmas." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. "Thank you. I shall treasure it." She hesitated, then added, "I have something for you as well, though it's still in my chambers." "Then we shall exchange properly this evening," he said with a smile. His expression grew more serious as he gazed out over the frozen landscape. "Theodora, I've been meaning to speak with you about something." Her heart quickened. "Yes?" "Your planned departure." He turned to face her fully. "You were to stay until the new year, but I find myself, that is, I wonder if you might consider extending your visit." "For how long?" she asked, hardly daring to hope what his answer might be. "For as long as you wish." His blue eyes held hers intently. "Thornfield has become more of a home with you in it. I've become more myself with you beside me." He took her gloved hand in his. "I know you came here to offer comfort to a grieving widower, but you've given me far more than that. You've given me hope, Theodora. Hope for a future I never thought I'd want again." She felt tears prick at her eyes. "Edmund," a shout from the direction of the house interrupted her. They turned to see a footman running toward them across the snow. "My lord! My lord, come quickly! It's Lady Pembroke, there's been an accident." They rushed back to the house, where chaos reigned. Helen had returned unexpectedly, her face deathly pale, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage on her arm. The carriage overturned on the village road, she gasped as Edmund helped her to a chair. Ice on the hill, the coachman couldn't control the horses. "Send for Dr. Miller immediately," Edmund ordered the nearest servant. To Theodora, he added, "She's lost a great deal of blood." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. The doctor arrived and pronounced Helen's wound serious but not life-threatening, a deep gash where she had been thrown against the carriage door's broken window. She was carried upstairs to her chamber, where Theodora assisted the doctor in cleaning and stitching the wound. "She'll need complete rest," Dr. Miller instructed as he packed away his instruments. "The cut itself is clean, but she suffered a shock to her system. Watch for fever." By evening, Helen slept fitfully, her lady's maid keeping vigil at her bedside. Theodora found Edmund in the library, staring into the fire, a glass of untouched brandy in his hand. "How is she?" he asked immediately. "Resting comfortably. The bleeding has stopped." Theodora crossed to stand beside him. "She's stronger than she looks, Edmund." "I know." He set down the glass with a sigh. "But seeing her like that, so pale, so still. I've lost so many people I care for, Theodora. My parents, Caroline, our son. Sometimes I fear loving anyone, for fear of losing them too." The raw honesty in his voice made her heart ache. Without thinking, she reached out, taking his hand in hers. "We cannot live our lives in fear of loss, Edmund. That isn't living at all." He looked down at their joined hands, then slowly raised his gaze to her face. "What I was trying to say earlier, before we were interrupted. Theodora, I've grown to care for you deeply. More than I thought possible." His voice faltered. "I know it's too soon, that I have no right to ask, but I find I cannot imagine Thornfield, or my life, without you in it." "Edmund," she whispered, her heart pounding, "are you asking me to stay as your guest, or as something more? I'm asking if you could ever consider a future with me." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a fervent kiss to her palm. "Not immediately, I know you need time, that we both do. But someday, could you see yourself here, with me, as my wife?" Theodora felt tears fill her eyes. She had come to England to comfort a grieving man, never expecting to find healing for her own heart, never imagining she might love again. "Yes," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Edmund, I could." The joy that transformed his face was answer enough, even before he drew her gently into his arms. Their first kiss was tender, tentative, or the promise of things to come rather than a passionate declaration. When they parted, Edmund rested his forehead against hers. "This isn't how I planned our Christmas Eve," he murmured. Theodora smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "Perhaps not. But I think it's exactly what we both needed." Outside, snow began to fall again, dusting Thornfield's ancient stones with fresh white. Inside, by firelight, two people who had known profound loss found the courage to embrace joy once more, and discovered that the greatest gift of all was the chance to love again.